We're continuing on in the Gospel of John. We're in chapter 1, and today we're going to be looking at verses 14 through 18. What I'm going to do is I'm giving sections of it, and then when I come towards the end of the first chapter, which is it's got 51 verses, I'm going to break it down in an outline fashion for you so you can see the whole chapter um, in a glance. Okay, imagine if you would that you were all alone and God appears and he's right there in front of you. What would you do? What would you do if God was right there in your presence and for the first time in your life you could see him? What would your response be? I know what mine would be. First of all, I would be in awe. I don't even know if at first I could even speak. Second of all, I'd be in wonderment. Wow. You know? Third thing, I'd be like a child in a candy store. And I would be so curious about so many things about him, about his creation, about his purpose. Okay. Fourth thing, I wouldn't let him go. I wouldn't want him to leave. Okay. I wouldn't leave his presence. So I'm gonna, Lord Jesus, I'm gonna stick right here with you. Okay. Now just keep that in mind. Okay, as we go through this passage. Okay. So and we've seen in verse 1 of chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So we're identifying the Word, Logos, as God. Who was the Word? Well, in verse 14, it tells us, and the Word became flesh. Okay, basically the Word is an expression. Okay, the Logos, the exegesis of who God is, the witness of who God is in the flesh. Okay, and he dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. Glory is as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. Okay, John bore witness of him. Now, watch this. And cried out, saying, this was he of whom I said, he who comes after me has a higher rank than I, and he existed before me. So John is already testifying that Jesus, the Word, the Logos, was in existence before him. Okay. For of his fullness we have all received, and grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth were realized through Jesus Christ. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten God, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has, listen to this, he has explained him. If you want to know what God is like, all you have to do is look at Jesus. It's just that simple. You know, in the Old Testament, it says no one has seen God at any time, and that's true. Nobody has ever seen God in his completeness. They may have seen a partial theophany, you know, or an anthropomorphic concept of God, but nobody has ever seen God in his completeness until Jesus came on the scene. And John the Baptist is given testimony of this. Okay, he existed before creation. He's the one that created everything, anything and everything that has ever been in existence. The root source of all that was Jesus. Now, Jesus, God, decides to come to earth and take on humanity. He didn't leave his deity. He's still God. He now takes on humanity. So he's both fully God and fully man. And we'll talk more about that later when we get into maybe I'll talk about Christology and the very essence and nature of Jesus. But for now, we just need to understand that John the Baptist is given testimony of Jesus, who is God in the flesh. And if you want to know something about God, all you got to do is look at Jesus. Now, I don't look at Jesus just here. I look at him in the Old Testament as the pre-incarnate Christ. I also look at him in his public ministry, and I look at him in the tribulation and in the millennial as a king. Here he is as coming as a servant. That's why a lot of Jews don't accept him, because they see Jesus coming as a king, not as a servant. Okay, and that's why you have all those double messianic prophecies in the Old Testament, and they're confused with a lot of them. But Jesus comes as both. First, he came as a servant, then he's going to come as a king. Okay, well, here for the first time now, God is walking among men. Now, what we have here also, and this is important for us to understand, the book of John was written primarily so that we would believe that Jesus is in fact God, the Christ, and through believing in him, you may have eternal life. And he says that as many as receive him, to them he gave the right to become the children of God. So right away, that verse does away with any kind of universal concept of everybody is just a child of God, and everybody is not. You're born, he created you physically, he gave you a soul, but your spirit has not yet come alive until you're born again. That is the ability to become a child of God. Okay, so there's two births. The birth that you're born from your parents is your physical birth, and then there's the rebirth of what they call being born again. And we're going to talk more about that, especially when we get to Nicodemus in John chapter 3. But he says he gives you the right to become the children of God. You're not automatically a child of God. If I'm a child of God, no, you're not. Not until you're born again. He gives you that right. But there's no such thing as universalism salvation. It doesn't exist. Each person has to appropriate the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ to atone for their own sins. Okay, it's a one-time event. It only happens once. You were born once from your parents. You were born in water, in the sack, water sack. And by the way, I'm going to play golf today with a gynecologist. So he's a cool guy. We make a lot of jokes and have fun. But and then you were born a spirit. Okay, so he gives you the right. Now, and it's also important as you're recognizing this in the book of John, that Jesus is God's expression to the world. And what's sad, and I think it's one of the saddest things, you look in verse 10, that said he was in the world and the world was made through him and the world did not know him. They didn't recognize him. Okay? And not only they didn't recognize him, his own people didn't recognize him. Can you imagine God coming into your house and in your room and you don't know who he is? You don't recognize him as God? You got to be pretty blind. And that's how a lot of people are today. They're blind. It's like I was talking about Jesus as being both light, life, and light. He gives us life, and then he gives us the ability to get light. That's when we become born again. But if you're not born again, you won't recognize. If God come and walk among you, recognize he's just another person. You know. Spiritual insight is the ability to see. When you talk about epistemology is different ways of people, how they can learn. Not everything is learned through the physical senses, through your eyes, through the smell, through the taste, through feel, through basic empirical senses. There, you can also learn through your spirit, okay? As a form of dualism, you know, although the physical world is right here and it has all its laws, like gravity, laws of physics. What's also right here is spirit world where God can take this and instead of it dropping straight down, can overcome the law of gravity supernaturally. It's called a miracle. Every time you pray and you have an answered prayer, that's a miracle. It's when eternity touches the temporal world that we live in. Okay, so we see miracles all the time, but the unsaved person, the person that doesn't know Christ, doesn't recognize him. Okay, now, at the beginning of this message, I told you to imagine if you were in your house and you're there and God appears, and now you recognize him as John the Baptist did. What would you have done when you were there? Let me tell you something. That's available to you right now. God is here. You can enjoy his presence right now. Okay? If you sense he's here, you can talk to him. You can ask him any question you want. In his word, he's going to give you wisdom. He's going to give you all kind of understanding. He's going to share his life with you. Called fellowship. That's why he created you. Not to be like somebody else, but to be uniquely you, with all your faults, all your problems, all your praise, all your thankfulness, every living breath you have to enjoy his presence. A number of years ago, there was a guy by the name of Brother Lawrence who wrote a book called Practicing the Presence of God. And so how do you go from the physical to the spiritual? Okay, little children are already there. They can do it right away. Why? Because they haven't had their faith and their belief system distorted by problems and people betraying them and letting them down and all that. So they're very believing. When you practice the presence of God, God is here. God is here. To the point where that practice becomes your reality. You're going to enter into a different phase of spirituality than you ever had before. Every walking, living moment, I've been doing this for so many years, that every moment that I have, I know that Jesus is right here. Now, I know he's inside of me legally, okay? I also know that he's inside of me or beside of me practically, okay? And that's a whole nother discussion. Someday, maybe I'll talk about standing in state and how it all works together, But it's a beautiful thing to have fellowship with God and to know that he's right here with you. That was the experience of John the Baptist. Now, he's going to expand more on this as we go on. And people are going to wonder, John, are you the Christ? And John's going to make it really clear, no, I'm not the Christ. I'm just a forerunner. I'm just the one that announces him. He's going to increase and I'm going to decrease. But what I want you to walk away from today is that Jesus came to earth to be the message and expression of God the Father. So if you want to know him, all you got to do is spend time with Jesus. Okay? You all have a great day. It looks like it's going to be, it's all beautiful now. The sky's blue. It's starting to warm up. This is going to be a great day. This is the day the Lord has made, hasn't it? God bless you all.